Hi there, and welcome to another episode of African Business Stories, your insight into female innovators and entrepreneurs building and running businesses in Africa. I'm Agoo Okoye, and on the show today, I'll be chatting with Roberta Annan, Managing Partner of Annan Capital Partners and Managing Partner and Co-founder of Impact Fund for African Creatives. We talk about the power of networks, building communities of people who want to do good, and financing the scale-up of Africa's creative industry. Let's get into it. Hey, Roberta, we're on. We're on. So I guess like with most of my guests, I want to start from the beginning. So I know that you were born and raised in Ghana, and I understand that you moved to India at some point. So I was wondering what that experience was like.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Ghana. I lived in Ghana. So my formative years were in Accra, were spent in Accra, Ghana. I moved to India in my early teens, so around age 12, 13. I believe it was right before my 13th birthday, we moved to New Delhi. So in New Delhi,
Mm,
my stepfather was Ghana's naval commander, and he had served for 6 years. So he was given he wasn't a career diplomat, but he was given the opportunity to serve as Ghana's High Commissioner to India, Myanmar, which was then Burma, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and India. And Maldives. So we lived in India, where we were based, and I started high school there. So I went to the British School of New Delhi. Unfortunately, my stepfather passed away while I was at post. So yes, it was quite a tragic death that actually was one that I actually recollect even at this age. I remember exactly how it happened, and at that particular time, my mother wasn't around. She had traveled to Ghana with a delegation, and I was alone with him when he literally
wow.
died in my arms at the hospital, and it was quite a traumatic experience for me at that young age. I was very confused. Had to break the news to my mother. Now, of course, with all the procedures of bringing, somebody, an influential individual who has passed, outside of the country, had to deal with all.
Right.
It was quite difficult. But that really helped me to build resilience, and I gained
Hmm.
strength. And I realized, I guess I had always that inner strength, but that experience and the way I managed it maturely really showed me that there isn't anything that I can do if I put my mind to it. And I needed
Right.
to believe in myself and believe that I have the strength and basically, also have the confidence to be able to do things, because it's all about confidence and uh, how
Hmm.
you can apply wisdom to certain situations, and this has helped me a lot. That experience, as painful as it was, it really helped me to
Right.
to build that inner resilience and strength. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's just great how one can take a situation that was meant to be tragic and just draw strength from it. So when you left India, did you go back to Ghana?
So I left India. I believe I was 16 when I left India. And I was actually given the option to stay in India. I had a very good friend who, Misha Kurana and her mother, wanted to take me in because we had finished our O levels at the British School of Delhi,
Right.
and I was just about to enroll into my A levels, and Misha's mother wanted me to stay on because they would take care of me and send me over to boarding school in the UK with her. Um, but unfortunately for me, I mean, I just saw the state my mother was in. It's quite a difficult place to be in your
Hmm.
husband when you're not even with him. So she's not even spend the last few hours of his life with her. So that was very difficult. And then, of course, knowing how Africa is and how, families often behave, especially if it's a prominent person in the family has passed on, and inheritance issues. And, we have these challenges. It's not just in the stories that we watch on Nollywood. It's actually, a major challenge. And I saw my mother actually go through it. So there were just so many uncertainties and, variables. And I just thought it didn't make sense to be away from my mom. So I declined the offer to go to boarding school in the UK to have everything paid for and go to Ghana to be with my mother to offer her support that she needed. And that was the most amazing decision that I made in my life. I'm telling you. I literally saw my mother gain strength again. She gained weight, but
Mm.
lost. She became like half her size. I saw her have that, impetus to really like build all over again. Went back to boarding school in Ghana at SOS Hebamina International College, a college that really gave me the opportunity to see what giving back really means. And I'm so thankful that my mother took me to that school because
Mm.
even though it was very difficult for her financially, it's a very, very expensive school. My mother forced and made sure that I got into the school, and she made sure that I graduated from that school. And I did the international baccalaureate program, which really allowed me to also do something called creativity, action, and service, which is focus on your creativity and how you are working towards the betterment of your society, right? So I was introduced to philanthropy and giving back even at that tender
Mm.
age. I mean, these are seeds that were already sown in me when I was young, because my mother used to do a lot of charitable work. And I remember my Christmas, most kids will spend Christmas at home and get gifts for themselves. My Christmas was me giving my toys or buying toys for the less fortunate. So we would go to villages and organize birthday parties for the kids. And that's how I spent my holidays with my brother.
Mm.
So I already had that in me. But then when I went to SOS, I then developed it in an academic sense. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yes, you are.
And that later translated to how I, you know, um, started initiatives at the United Nations, even working with the United Nations as a consultant, and even now with my Goodwill ambassadorship position with them. It's
Sure.
almost like inevitable.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, we'll come to talk about these other things, but it's interesting to see how reflective you've been, and drawing on the things that have shaped you as an individual, and impacted the direction that your career has gone. So I know that you wanted to be a doctor, or someone in your family wanted you to be a doctor. You went on to college in North America. You studied biochemistry and graduated with honors, but then you ended up at the UN doing development work. So can you just unpack that a bit for us?
So it's interesting you say that because I come from a family of scientists. So my
Mm.
grandfather was the first pharmacist in his family. I believe he's the first to even graduate from university in his family, and he had 16 children.
Oh.
Almost all. He's also from the royal family on that side so he had two wives, eight kids each. He made sure that all the kids had some kind of scientific, especially when you're young, he wanted to make sure that they were all scientists or at least studied to a certain extent. So I have aunties who are
Mm.
all either PhDs in microbiology or, one of my aunties was one of the senior managers at Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, doctors, pharmacists, nurses, everybody in the family. Almost everybody has a child that is
Hmm.
in the science. That my mother is an artist. Okay, so she always like the rebel. She's an artist. She has a degree in theater arts. from the University of
Right.
Ghana, Legon, and my brother is also a creative. And I was the one that my mother was positioning to basically take on that science, baton for the family.
Hmm.
And I did it to an extent, but I realized that I was really good at science. I really understood science to a level that I think sometimes even amazed my professors. And I took it all the way to the master's level. So I have a master's in biochem and biotech, graduated with honors. I created my own internship for the first time because most people went and worked with biotech firms or law firms. I ended up working with the World Bank. I did
Right.
something that was completely different, that got me the opportunity to travel to Yerevan in Armenia. I got a scholarship to travel as part of this World Bank program. And this is where I started networking my way into getting a job at the United Nations. So at Yerevan, I met with my first boss at the UN, Abulan Khan.
Hmm.
And he was the executive director for the Global Alliance for ICT and Development. And I remember I spoke to him and said, I'm about to graduate from Georgetown. I'm very interested in the United Nations. I have a science background. I wanted to go and do work at the UN Biotech. The UN Biotech, the minimum degree that you have to have is a PhD. And at that time, I didn't have a PhD. Did not want to go
Right.
into a PhD program because I knew I wasn't going to do research. So I wanted to get experience at the UN and then see where, just being open enough to know where life, the direction you end up going. So I guess I was still trying to figure myself out. I knew that I wasn't going to be a scientist. So my mother was quite disappointed when I said to her, Mom, I'm giving up the science. And at that time, too, it was very difficult for international students to get jobs. So that coupled with so many things, I ended up in New York City with an internship at the United Nations.
Hmm.
And girl, that changed my life. It opened my eyes to so many things in life. I got very fortunate to have networked
Hmm.
with the right people the moment that I went there. I realized I had a gift of networking and brokering very high level relationships. So the first friend I made at the UN was the executive director for something that was called the United Nations Office for Partnerships, which was set up
Right.
by Ted Turner gave 2 billion to the UN, and 2 billion at
Hmm.
that time UN could not accept such a large donation because the UN has to always remain neutral when it comes to commerce.
Right.
So they created this arm of the UN and the UN Foundation that started finding a way to interact with private sector. And the person that managed it, Sir Amir Dorsal, was the executive director, and he became my friend. So I would go to his office, have coffee with him, and pick his brain. And he's a great networker, and I learned so much from Amir. I started getting invited to all these high level events, and I would go in there and I would network. I remember once I was giving I went to an event, and right next to me was a lady that was the fiancée of Ted Turner, and she did not tell me who she was. I just started chatting with her, and then she gave me her card. We exchanged cards. She told me to come over for coffee the next day. I did, and she said, "Maybe, young lady, you can help me. I'm trying to do a trip to Rwanda and Kenya to visit some orphanages for my project." And I said, "Oh, no problem. I can do this for you." So I started, how I started working and gaining trust. It's like I was offering service for free. I said, "No, I'm going to put all of this together for you." I did that. And I created this whole package for her where she traveled to Rwanda and Kenya, and she met with, high level individuals, heads of state. They took her to the orphanages, and she had an amazing trip. She was so impressed by it that she invited me the next,
Hmm.
after she returned to the US, to Atlanta to Ted Turner's home for dinner.
Wow.
And at that dinner, I remember it was like yesterday. I just right next to his apartment, I saw the CNN building, and he was telling us about how he started CNN and had a really nice group of people. Then I realized immediately that this is what I want to do. I want to network. I want to build different communities of people that want to do good, that want to make a change. I want to bring these people together. I want to couple that with raising funding to support some of the socioeconomic challenges that we're having on the continent, because we cannot rely only on government. Because you see, unfortunately, these guys have put a lot of resources into government and haven't seen any change. So there's a need
Right.
to start creating these small organizations. It doesn't have to be nonprofit, but it's like a community of practice, like people who really understand um, and challenges and they want to address it. So regardless of what it is, we all have the same mindset. We all have the same objectives and aims. We want to put our money together, whether it's an investment club, try to find solutions to
Right.
these problems. That's why I started um, Roberta Annan Consulting Limited after the UN.
Yeah, Rebecca, let me just pause there. I want to I the statement you made I think is just brilliant. Building communities of people who want
Yes,
to do good. I think that's really important. And before we come to the
yes,
consultancy, you left the UN and you went to South News, and you've described it as a game changer
yes.
for your career. So if you can talk to us a little about that, and then I'll
Yeah,
come to
yeah.
Africa Moon. Yeah.
So, South News was the last position, my last position at the United Nations. And it was
Right.
when I started, I don't know what came of the organization, but it was created as part of the South Corporation, which is part of UNDP. There was an initiative that was supposed to look at how countries of the global South can trade and support each other with
Right.
policy. So they wanted to have a news outlet that would disseminate some of these best practices. And I was given the title of a business developer. In fact, I started there as an assistant, and I worked my way to having a desk, and I was in charge of Africa. The reason why it changes,
Mm.
we used to organize something called the South South Award. It was a yearly event. It was called the Grammys of the UN. So each year, all the heads of states, the private sector individuals from Carlos Slim Helu to Bill Gates, all of them were convened in one room at the World of Astoria. And I organized that event. And I
Mm.
was in charge of um, the African, arm of it as well to ensure that our African billionaires and heads of states had a presence. And this was when I started becoming more visible to the African scene in terms of what I was doing at the UN because I took my time to learn. I took my time to learn resource
Right.
mobilization and networking because I always tell people fundraising is 90% relationship, 10% the work. Um, so I learned that skill
Mm.
very quickly. But then nobody really knew what I was doing. I was just there at the UN. And it was until I got to South News and started working on South Awards when I started getting introduced and meeting people like Aliko Dangote, Tony Lulumidu, Florence Alakija, President Obasanjo. Started meeting these people and I was hosting them every time at the UN. So, I always wanted to know what was going on in the continent and how I could plug in. The Kola Kareems became very good friends of mine and always trying to find ways
Mm.
to flag me back into the African scene. Now, what changed the whole situation for me is when President Obasanjo one day told me, Roberta, you have such a great network and hardworking young woman. You need to be back on the continent because Africa
Mm.
needs people like you. And that is when it changed. I was like, oh my God, I never thought of it because I always thought, okay, I'm in America. I'm getting, I have a husband, I have a child, I have a job. Like I was very comfortable. So I never thought that I would actually leave that and um, kind of start again, come to Africa where nobody really knows me because technically is Africa is relationship based economy. If you're going to make it, you,
Yeah.
you have to know who's in government. If you're going to make it, you have to know who's in power. Nobody knows
Correct.
me. I'm a young girl who left when I was young, came back for 2 years, did college and high school, went back after high school overseas. So I'm not really socialized. So the social capital aspect of it is lacking. But and
Mm.
and my mother worked in government and went overseas. She's also like retired. So I just found it a bit challenging, but I was like, you know what? I can go back and try to make a difference in the way that I feel I can. But when he said that to me, I set up a company in the US and I started in the US and I was doing Ghana and US. I did the Vogue Italia Africa trip. I did I did with Franca
Right.
Susani. I did the Miss Universe International Africa tour with Leila Lopez. I did with EcoBank. That was actually one of my first clients. Paid, paid, because normally I was doing a lot of volunteer work. And then then I did the VistaJets Africa tour as well.
Right.
So these were really great, and it kind of gave me a wider network to even really do what I wanted to do. And then after the VistaJet thing, I decided I was just going to come back on the continent. Unfortunately for me, the marriage was not working, so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go back and start all over again.
So, so Roberta, so how long was
Mhm.
it between um you setting up in New York to actually then moving back
Two
to
years.
Ghana?
2 years. It
Okay.
took me 2 years because I remember I had an office on Madison Avenue and 56, right opposite the Four Seasons, for a whole year.
Okay.
And then I worked out of a friend's, like I went into a partnership. So we had an office close to the Trump Towers, also just across the street from there for another year. So it was 2 years. But we did that I managed serious clients during that period, like the Vogue Italia, Vista Jets,
Right.
Miss Universe organization, and then later on they gave me the license for Ghana for Miss Universe because I kept telling them that I wanted to. Uh, they offered it to
Hmm.
me, and it wasn't really my thing, but I got into a lot of trouble after that. Yeah, a lot of trouble in Ghana. But I guess everybody has makes their mistakes, and they learned from it. But pageantry was not my thing. But
Right.
so I mean, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. So it was after 2 years of being in New York, I just decided that, you know what, I'm going to go back to Africa full time because in Africa to build, you need to be there. And
Right.
unfortunately for me, my first attempt at doing something was Miss Universe. So again, this social capital and who is this person who just came in and thinks she's all that and trying to do Miss Universe. I got into a lot of trouble. And I always wanted to change how things were done. I always wanted to focus. I had this theme that I'd introduced into the Miss Universe Ghana, which was beauty with substance, so it's not just about being beautiful because I realized that a lot of young people in Ghana focus on their beauty and it was more about
Hmm.
the outside and what they can gain and how they can take advantage of men and that whole thing. I wanted to change it and I wanted to get women to believe in themselves, to focus on the
Right.
education and entrepreneurship. So I started introducing those courses within the Miss Universe, and that did not sit well at all with them. They wanted cars and prizes, and all of the things that I didn't want to give. And it was a quite a tumultuous time for me, about 3 years, and I decided, you know what, this is not going to work for me, so I need to focus my energy into other things. But I'd also created African Fashion Foundation as a result of
Hmm.
my work with Franca Susani. They appointed me on the board for Fashion for Development as the Africa chair, and I was working with Franca and Evie. So I remember, this is so interesting how things always come full circle. My first international event in fashion was with Franca Susani, where I attended as her assistant for the International Herald Tribune, where Suzy Menkes used to be. She organized this big luxury conference on Africa, and Franca spoke, and I
Okay.
went as her assistant. And I met her. That's when I saw the power that fashion has. The fashion industry has so much power and influence, and that needs to be driven to, that needs to be used to drive change. And we're not using it in the way that we should. So, but I saw it, that was the first time that I actually got that introduction to major CEOs of international luxury brands, and Franca introducing me to them as her Africa person. And it was quite a humbling experience for me. And last year, I was invited by Susan Menkes to speak at the summit, 7 years. Yes. So it just, it makes me happy that I've remained consistent, and regardless of the challenges that I have faced, and I have faced challenges. I have faced challenges because I came with a great, momentum and interest because of what I'd seen at the UN to really change, and based on very influential people who were just giving me that encouragement because they saw what I had, right? To come to the continent and drive change. And then I met people who were not willing to accept me and support me and work with me. And it wasn't based on merit anymore, because remember, the US was merit. I got the best grades, I graduated with honors, I networked my way to the top. I gained trust of very influential family officers and people. So over there, you're like, doing so well. But you come to a system where it's based on relationships and who you know. Yeah. And that is a very different dynamic altogether. So I had to unlearn all that. I realized that it's not about merit anymore. It's based on relationships, and you need to build social capital here. And initially I rebelled. I was like, no, it shouldn't be like this. I'd gone to school. I even went all the way back to Harvard Business School to learn, because I was now doing things in finance and I did not have a basic training in that. And I'm like, I've done all of these things. I graduated highest honors, summa cum laude. Like, people should just, and Africa doesn't work like that. Who's your father? Aha. So that is the system that we have in place on the continent, and you have to.
So how did you navigate that? So here you are, young lady, single mom, building a business, and you come to a point where you're faced with the realization that social capital matters. But then you still go ahead and build this wealth management company in this environment where you lack social capital. So how did you go about doing that?
Partnerships. I realized that
Right.
I lacked skill set, because I above all of this, right? If you execute and you deliver, people start respecting you. And that is what I focused on.
Right.
It's not that instant gratification or instant acceptance, because that it's non-existent for those of us who have come, who don't have that social capital. But I realized that for me to be able to navigate my way in, I needed to come with people who really understood what they were doing. Because and so that's when, for instance, in wealth management, I took 2 years of my time. I went to school, back to school. I did two things. One is to go back to school to learn about finance and financial advisory and basic business principles. Then I went to work with an organization in the United Kingdom called ALDG Partnership, which was a multi-family office that has wealth management, direct investments into trust and fiduciary business. And when I went there, I applied, because remember, I've gained all these relationships, but not necessarily I haven't had any background or training in any under any organization. So when I went to work with them for 2 years, that's when I started understanding how things are done in a structured manner, how deals are done, how you go from onboarding clients all the way to like signing your deal, like the whole process. And I went in as a partner. This is a mistake that a lot of people make. They just want to take a job and get paid. I was more focused on gaining knowledge and being given a seat at the table, because that meant I would learn very quickly, and people were very transparent with me when it comes to how things are done. And that's exactly how I positioned myself. I went in there as a 50% partner in the Africa business, and we structured everything that way. And 2 years, After 2 years, when the group decided they were going to expand into other regions in North Africa, I decided to go with African clients and set my business up in Mauritius. And I've always partnered. So we have a wealth management offering, which is in partnership with Lac Léman and Aquila, which is in Geneva. Uh, we have our so for the trust and fiduciary business, it also channels to them. So everything we do, we have people that execute, partners that execute, and that's how I'm able to do a lot of transactions. People say, "Okay, you seem like a small business, so are you doing all these big things?" I always keep a very lean operation, and I always partner with big organizations. I'll give you an example, like with Philstone, I'm the senior market liaison. Philstone has offices in over 12 countries, and they have a solid team, and they've done over 20 billion in transactions in infrastructure. And I'm on the senior advisory team, and I'm also the head of their. Basically, I take care of all the business in Ghana. I keep a lean operation. I don't have very high overheads.
So that is Roberta Annan Capital Partners.
Yes.
And then we see your philanthropical side just keeps coming out in different parts. So Africa Fashion Foundation is still operational. And now we're talking about the Impact Fund for African Creatives. Can you talk to us a bit about that? Because, of course, I know from listening to you, you've talked about your mom being a creative and your brother. And if you can just talk to us a bit about the
so I believe this whole creative economy, I always tell people that it was inevitable. I come from a mother who's a creative, my brother's a creative. I've always been around them and how they think and all that. And I realized the challenges that creatives also face, because I've learned it firsthand, right? Is they lack infrastructure. And they lack infrastructure, they lack finance, and also access to market. So I was through African Fashion Foundation, I wanted to address some of these challenges, but I realized that without money, you cannot make a difference, especially when it comes to creative economy on the continent. So I'll say that IFAC is a result of my work and my experience at AFF, because AFF was my own investment. And I really thought about how I could, change how the whole creative economy scene is on the continent, like looking at the entire gamut of creativity, music, film, because there's so much creativity on the continent. In fact, because Africa has a very young population, 65% under the age of 25, people are creative and innovative. Because of technology, people are very, very, very creative, but there is no infrastructure, there's no IP, intellectual property. It's like, so somebody can come up with a collection, and the next thing you know, someone else is copying it, and they can't sue, the person who is copied, because there's no intellectual property. Same with music. And there's a lot of appropriation, of our culture and our creativity, where I see that what's happening is once the creative abilities are taken by bigger, firms that have the infrastructure and the capacity, then they package it well and deliver it back to us as premium and luxury brands, and we have to pay a high price for it. So I want to really disrupt the status quo. I was like, no, this cannot be the case. But you cannot do it as a foundation. I mean, between 2014 and 2019, AFF has invested over 1.1 million euros into African fashion brands, and this is money from the company, my for-profit. So we donate from the profits that we make just to support AFF. And it was just recently when we were applying for grants that I had to do we did the comprehensive financials, and I was like, oh my God, I've actually spent quite a bit. But you cannot really see the impact, because I'm supporting some designer from here to New York. I'm supporting another from here to Paris. But it adds up, but you don't really see the impact. But to see for impact, you need to have finance. And that's what people think, that finance and impact are mutually exclusive. No, for you to make an impact, you have to make a profit, and you have to have money. So I decided 2 years ago, I partnered with the Ethical Fashion Initiative to do a major soft launch of this impact fund for African creatives in Paris with the European Commission. And it was an amazing thing because people received it well. And then they said, Roberta, now you go and put it together. So I spent 2 years to put IFAC together. I got the right team of people that understand the whole investment, DFIs, especially development finance institutions, who understand the socioeconomic um, empowerment as well that such a fund would actually contribute them to the African economy. So looking at it from an inclusive growth and development perspective. So it's a fund that is supposed to address this burgeoning young population by giving them the investment that they need to create and build that infrastructure that is needed to have a robust creative economy. Because we believe, and I know it's also the belief of the European Commission and a lot of DFIs, that for us to meet that target of a trillion dollar economies on the African continent, we have to invest in creative economy. It's what we call the creative and cultural industries. So it's going from gaming to film industry to fashion industry to art, to architecture, everything in this CCR industry, we believe is what is actually going to transform and give that economic transformation that Africa needs.
So in light of the COVID pandemic, what's investment appetite like, with the HNIs, and how philanthropic are people being with regards to your nonprofit business?
Yeah, so I mean, the most I've been very busy during these COVID times, and like I say, I always go where the opportunity is very quickly and apply serious divine wisdom. So during COVID, a lot of the DFIs created stimulus packages that would support, especially the creative economy. And this is why I know the creative economy is very important to donors that are coming in, philanthropists that are coming in from family, outside in, not necessarily those that are on the continent, because my focus is not on those that are on the continent. And I'll say why. Because when people make money on the continent, right, the concept of wealth is very new. So people that are focused on capital preservation, they're not going to give their money to creatives. No, because they feel creativity, like that whole creative economy and creatives are always, like, the industry is very fragmented. So they don't see how quickly they can navigate and make a return on investment. And that is the truth. That is why I have created this fund, because I feel the fund is going to create that infrastructure so that later on, maybe 5 years from now, after we've made some investments and we have some success stories and very good X returns on investments for our investors, people are now going to look at the creative industries very differently. And individuals are going to be comfortable to invest more because they don't see it now. I see the potential, because if you don't understand this burgeoning youth population and how it's a huge potential for investment, and you're looking at oil and gas, look at what COVID has done to oil and gas industry.
Right.
Oil prices have gone down. So a lot of investors outside see that potential. It's quite interesting because I also deal in wealth management. So they see that, and there's a lot of allocation of money towards the creative economy. Just recently, Universal Music Group has done a partnership to expand its business on the continent. I think Def Jam Africa has been launched just recently. Netflix has done a powerful deal with Mo Abudu Ebony Live. That tells you the direction, because you see, when COVID happened, everything was around content creation and how we can keep people indoors and how we can digitize the creative economy. And so the only industry, one of the few industries that thrived, is the creative economy. I'm telling you, and not the other industries that we often think, are going to transform our economies. It's actually the creative industry. And that's why my work has even become more important. So I was called on to create strategies for a lot of DFIs. We did one, which is coming out very soon, which is also going to give technical assistance money to creatives on the continent. Like always argue for technical assistance money. It's going to be extremely difficult to go from where we are, post COVID to expecting very high return, especially when we're talking about small, medium enterprises. So we need to start it off with technical assistance, free money to build that infrastructure that is needed before our fund will then come in and start making investments and expecting return on investments. And then you have the bigger one players like the Afri-Exim banks that have the 500 million
Yeah.
facilities to support the creatives, African Development Bank. Those ones are like financial institutions, so the expectations are quite different. But it's very complementary, and this can really transform the creative economy. But yeah, so the answer is there's more interest in the creative economy by investors that are outside. So more like foreign direct investors. And DFIs, development finance institutions, are investing a lot in this space because they see the transformational opportunity there for the economies. And they also see it as a tool to target this burgeoning youth population. And that is what we also see.
Okay, so I see the benefit for DFIs and for foreign investors. But what about the people on the ground, the Africans, the people with the skills? Of course, we all talk about how a lot of the creative industry is in the informal sector. Can they see more prosperity if they remain in the informal sector, or do you think that the sector has to be made more formal?
Yeah.
How does that bit work?
Yeah, I believe that for us to see the benefits of the creative or the contributions, economic contributions, we have to formalize the informal sector. And I think that's why a lot of governments, I know our governments have targeted stimulus packages to help SMEs because about 86% of our economy is in the informal sector. And then over 50% of these businesses are also run by women. So they needed to create, because actually this was what was driving the economies on the continent. That is why we could not have long term, like a lockdown process could not be more than 2 weeks or a month, because these people are the ones driving the economy. So
Right.
there is now an incentive to ensure that these businesses stay in business so that they can actually contribute positively to the economy. But I feel the next step would be formalizing them. So how do you formalize these? And this is something that we're looking at, from our grants. How do we add technology, as a tool to formalize the informal sector? How do we ensure that we even use education? Because when I talk about infrastructure, education is part of infrastructure. And how do we use education as a tool to help people understand that, their basic accounting is important. They need to file taxes. They need to, do all of these things to thrive in businesses. And it's not a way to actually cut corners to make more money, but you actually end up paying penalties which put you in debt, as a small business if you don't pay your taxes. So it's more about educating people and getting them to understand, the importance of doing this and how their small contributions add to the pool that actually we call our GDP. So it's a very important exercise, and I see that governments and individuals are changing, businesses are changing, and banks are having more relaxed terms, softer terms for SMEs. So I hope it continues as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. What's next for Roberta?
Honestly, I'm going to be 38 in December.
Wow.
And I keep telling myself that by 40, I feel like I've been on a marathon, since 16 when my stepfather died, and it hasn't stopped. There's never been a break. There's never been a moment to breathe. It's always been one battle after the other, whether it's in relationships, it's in business, it's in parenting, it's in my mother's health, family. It's been one major marathon. But I also feel that even when in the midst of all of the chaos, I am able to bring the best out of myself, and I'm able to do things which, transform, communities, and I believe eventually nations.
Right.
But I want to take a bit of a break. So once towards the end of a year, when we've announced our first level of investments, I am going to be investment advisor on the fund, and I have a full team, very capable team of investment directors and investment committee that are going to be involved. I'm not saying that I won't be involved, I'll be involved, but in a way that is not as I don't want to be too. I don't want to be like too busy. I feel like I've created this amazing opportunity. It wasn't about me. It was about the transformation of the continent. And I need to have the right people who understand, how this works to be part of it. And then I will be on that team, but I'm not going to be the only person driving it like I have
Right.
been driving other things. Even with the foundations, earlier this year, we had a lot of changes where we brought in a new team. I'm on the board of the foundation and I want to remain on that. And I want to invest. I want to invest in businesses that I feel have the potential to, you know, um, support the socio-economic development of Africa, and especially those that are being led by women. We just did a stimulus package with the Women Empowerment Investment Group with my partners, Guba, to support SMEs that are led by women. And I want to do a lot more of that because I know as a woman, the challenges I face, it's extremely
Right.
difficult for women to actually access finance. And I want to spend my time doing that. I want to sit on boards. I have a book coming up on my birthday in December.
Oh, congratulations.
Yes, yes, and I want to continue serving in my UN ambassadorial role. So, but I don't want to be too busy, traveling all over. I think I'm going to take some time off and travel when I have to, and do a lot more from my office in Ghana and spend time with my son and with my mom and my family. Yeah, I want to settle. I think I've done enough I've built an amazing empire, and I just want to relax and pray that God sustains it for me. And I want to also do a lot more work for the kingdom. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. So, what's your social capital like now?
Listen, with success and delivering, I've built such a strong social capital. It's unbelievable. And I was so worried about that. And I was very insecure, because of that. But I realized that when people don't allow you into the room, it's not always because they don't know you or they don't like you.
Right.
Sometimes when you build something, they will by all means have to bring you to the table, give you a seat at the table because you'll be a force to reckon with, and they would have to invite you to be part of the whole social circle. And it's not about social climbing, it's not about forcing your way through. It's about
Mhm.
focusing on the work you're doing so that people know what to call on you when they need certain things. And that is the most fulfilling thing for me. And I'm glad that I have few people around me that I trust, that trust me, that know I can deliver and call on me when they feel they need specific skill set that I carry. And I think it's the most rewarding thing. And I'm very comfortable where I am in Ghana, at home. Um, I feel it's no longer about, struggling to be part of something. I think it's more about, oh, we know Roberta and this is what she can deliver. So let's call on her because we want to achieve certain results. And it's a great, great, great feeling.
Thank you so much, Roberta. That was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That was Roberta Annan, Managing Partner, Annan Capital Partners, and Managing Partner and co-founder of Impact Fund for African Creatives. There's no doubt the African creative space has caught the eye of investors, from music to film and fashion. That said, there's still a lot to be done to scale up and formalize the sector so that Africans can see the economic benefit of these investments. Thank you so much for listening. Please remember to write us a review on Apple Podcast or on iTunes. I am Agoo, and you have been listening to African Business Stories.